Amy, thanks for joining me today. Maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and the work that you're doing.
Sure. So my name's Amy Stein, and I am the Executive Director of the Pixel Foundation, which was the Henry's Foundation, so part of Henry's Cameras.
So go back to part of Henry's Cameras.
Yes.
So obviously, I know that was a fourth generation family business. Maybe describe a little bit about the business, what it did, and the community that it served.
Sure. Yeah. So the business actually was started by my great grandfather in 1909, and it was originally actually he was a gemologist, and he repaired clocks on the Siberian Railway, and he basically opened up a shop here in 1909, and it then moved into as a pawn shop, and in the early 60s, we sold 4 rolls of Kodak film, and they sold it in one day, so we sold 4 more the next day, and that's really the big story about how we got into cameras. But in terms of sort of our community work, we would gladly donate a lot through the business, as well as through my family. It was sort of ingrained in us that philanthropy is very important, and if you can do it, you do it.
So where did that belief come from in the family that it's an important value of your family to support maybe others who are less fortunate or have a challenge that they're trying to overcome?
I think also because my grandparents came over from Europe. They came over with nothing, and their strategy for work and business was to put food on the table, and if they did that, that was good. And so we were able to get to a point where the business got bigger, and it was more sophisticated, and obviously making more money. And that was just a part of what was expected of you. That my mom was a volunteer at Planned Parenthood, so also very progressive. And my dad, actually, we donated through the business, and we sponsored the Henry's Tournament for Health, which was a women's golf tournament. We were the title sponsor for 10 years, supporting the Marva Koffler Breast Center at Mount Sinai Hospital. So we raised $1.3 million in 10 years, so, and which is something to be, I think, pretty proud of. We did gun amnesties, so trying to take guns off the streets across Canada in different cities. And we were sponsored for Ride to Conquer Cancer. So there were a number of different areas where we were donated, but we didn't have a strategy.
How important was it to your customers that Henry's, as a camera, well, as a more than just cameras, but that Henry's was involved in community work?
I think it was very important. That we didn't have big stores, but we were very much a part of the communities where we were and where we had stores. And yes, the donations and sponsorships obviously went through the marketing department, but where we donated, there was always a personal connection. So whether it was the families, one of our employees, there was always some connection there, and they're all good causes. So it's hard to say no.
Yeah, but you mentioned the word strategic, and so obviously you're donating. There's a personal connection, but what was it like when you decided, or was it you or your family sat down and decided we need to start to become more strategic around our giving, so that we're not supporting every worthy cause that comes through the door?
Yeah. So I think one thing is I think it's important to know sort of where you want to go, where you want to be, and who you are and who you're not, because by spreading yourselves too thin, which is what I think we were doing, we probably have less of an impact than we probably thought. I think they're all good causes, but we're not big enough to have five different causes. So we need to be strategic about it. And this is probably about 2 or 3 years before COVID, where we actually sat down and said, okay, we really need to talk about this as a family and say, what cause do we want to support? What do we want to do? Because we need to support one cause. And we need to be aligned with that.
What made you believe that supporting one cause or one kind of range of causes was important instead of kind of supporting a little bit of everything? What led you to that conclusion?
So I think part of it was my past work. just as a volunteer, raising money for Mount Sinai and a number of other causes, and knowing how much these organizations actually need to really make a difference. And I think there's a number of different ways of going about it. And there's lots of people who give money, and that's fantastic. There's lots of people who go in and offer their network up. And there's so many different ways of doing this to really have an impact. But I think sort of, $1,000 here, $1,000 there, $1,000 here isn't doing as much as it could if you give all 3,000 to one organization.
Mm-hmm.
But you need to be strategic about it and say, like, this is what we're supporting, this is our lane, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is our objective. This is where we want to get to.
I imagine these decisions were made with your family members,
Yes.
but so was there any pushback from the family that said, but I really want to continue to support a number of causes kind of ad hoc, or how did they
was, yeah.
respond to this, maybe this push to become more strategic?
So I think the push to be strategic also came from the fact that we also get so many requests for sponsorship, donations, everything. And we need to decide, who are we? We can't give to everybody. So we need to come back and say, look, we support these organizations. We want to support yours, but we can't do everybody. We can't support everybody. So we really did think hard about what causes we wanted to support personally as a family. And for us, there was mental health. There's mental health challenges in our family, and we were actually quite open about it. And so for us, I think that's a big piece of sort of who we are and our background and sort of why things happened.
So you're having these conversations around a more strategic approach. You then decided to go down the path and create Henry's Foundation, which has been subsequently been renamed to Pixel Foundation. But you created Henry's Foundation as a vehicle to bring all of the strategic giving together.
Yes.
What was that process like? Because it changes the way you view philanthropy away from marketing events and sponsorships towards actually thinking more deeply about the causes you're intending to support.
Yeah, so I think when we really originally thought about having a foundation, and do we need a foundation? Do we want one? And do you need a lot of money to start a foundation? I think I started researching that probably about 6 months before I moved over to what was to become the foundation and leaving the corporate side. And I basically had coffee with whoever would talk to me. I called up people who I may have not talked to for 10 or 15 years, but who I knew had good insight. And the only pushback I got was asking for government funds, because otherwise you'll be buried in paperwork. But there was no pushback on that. What we decided, though, was that we wanted to create a private foundation. And for us, that was about, we had control over where the money was going because we were taking public money. We also had some of our own money in. And that we wanted to make a statement that we were here for the long term. This wasn't a fly-by-night. It's, we were supporting mental health. We're around. We're not going anywhere. And this was going to be our legacy. And this is how we were going to help the community. So we knew we could put things through marketing and we could do all these other things. No, but we want, mental health was the foundation.
So you talked a little bit about how you took your family's giving approach, put strategic plan in place to bring it into some kind of construct called the Henry's Foundation. What did you learn in that process? How did you learn the ropes about how to go about do this? Because now you're on the path of creating something that you've never done before. Yeah,
so I guess, I came from the corporate side, so I was there for 20 years. And moved over to what was to become the foundation, which didn't exist. We didn't have anybody in-house except for me who knew anything about charities and what was really involved in creating this. And I would say, I think I said 6 months before I moved over to the foundation, I started talking to everybody that I could remember that I worked with when I did fundraising. And sort of looking around to say, okay, who are the experts in this field? How do I find them? Who do I talk to? And as soon as I started talking to people and telling them my story and what I wanted to do, they started opening up to say, you know what, you should really talk to this person. So I go and talk to that person. I kept following the breadcrumbs. And sometimes the meetings were great, and other times they were They weren't so great. And the ones sometimes you thought weren't going to be very good, those were some of the best. And, I found out about all of these groups. And so I'm part of a mental health group now for funders. Like there's all these sort of pockets of foundations and people who are doing this work that aren't very public. And, I think the networking piece has been a huge part of this.
So let me go back to, you're finding these groups, you're finding these ways to participate. I'm trying to think about somebody who maybe is in, in Whitehorse, Yukon, who's sitting there thinking like, I have a family, we've got a goal and an objective, but how do I get started?
Yeah.
Because I don't know anybody in my community that has done this. So what is your advice to somebody like that?
So I think my advice would be is one, definitely keep an open mind. Be very curious about everything. And, try obviously to stay along the path that you want to go down, because you can go down so many paths and really get in the weeds. One of the first things I did actually is I looked on the Philanthropic Foundations of Canada website, and they had guides on it about how to start a foundation. I also found lawyers who specialized in this area, and I would go to some of their seminars. I was probably one of the only non-legal people in the room who wasn't there for a credit. And I learned about T3010s and why they're so important and why you need to do these things. So I wanted to make sure what I was doing was also by the book and that I was doing this properly. And I had really good people to learn from.
How important was those strategic discussions that you had earlier with your family members in that process of getting set up in that kind of early stage governance? Did you reflect upon that strategy at all, and did that influence how you went forward?
Yeah, I think the strategy that I had while I was sort of doing the research, it was a very loose strategy. I'm not even sure I could call it a strategy at that point. It was really more about the discovery questions and discovery interviews with people, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And so, the first couple meetings you don't really have the right questions to ask. But when you're meeting with some of the right people, you're getting the right information. And that it's people that you trust. And then when they say, great, you should meet this person, it's somebody you can trust. So my questions, I think, also got better as I went along. And the more meetings I had, the better the questions got and the more targeted they were. To really figure out, okay, how do we want to do this? What's the best way? And my family, they were really good about it, especially at the beginning. They gave me free rein to go out and say, let's find out, is this something that we want to do? How do we want to do this? If it's mental health, what are some of the issues? Because part of that was that I wanted this to be evidence-based. And I wanted to make sure that we were not the people at the board table, deciding what the mental health issues of the day are. Right. We sell cameras. We're not experts. We're not medical experts or researchers. And to us, I think that was really important.
I'm really curious about, you say you were the only non-lawyer sitting in a seminar with lawyers around charity law. Did you have that little bit of that imposter syndrome?
I think I took it as a learning experience. I took it as, I'm back in school, I'm here to learn, and I would take notes like crazy. Part of it was just to make sure that I understood this, because when I got home, I'm not sure that I would remember all of this. And you know what, the people who were in the room were very receptive. There were a few other people that were not legal. Maybe they were accounting. But you know what, people were very open to the fact that I was there. Nobody had any issues. Sure, I definitely had imposter syndrome, but it was I'm here for me. I'm not here for anybody else. I want to make sure that the way that we run the foundation is the right way to do it. And I'm not getting us in trouble for something that I should have known better.
So you established the foundation in consultation with the family. You agreed that it's going to be focused on mental health.
Yes.
You've also mentioned that you make decisions around evidence. So what was the decision-making process early, and how has that evolved towards a more evidence-based decision in terms of who you choose to support with the funds?
Sure. So I guess sort of the chain of events was I moved from the corporate side to what was to become the foundation in April 2019. So for about 6 months before that, that's where I was having all of my coffees and my research. And even then I knew that we were pretty sure it was going to be mental health. We were then incorporated in May of 2019, and we received charitable status in September of 2019. We did leave our charitable objects very open, and we also kept sort of the scope of the foundation open because we knew that we didn't know all of the issues. And we started out with a very broad mandate of we support mental health for all Canadians, which we know is a massive statement that nobody could ever fulfill. But we wanted to start there because that would give us the time, I think, to learn what the real issues are. And I think if we just went out with something, I don't know that it's the right one. And we're also we were a national organization, so we had different charities across the country that we had partnered with. And so we just wanted to make sure that we covered a broad spectrum and that our employees liked it, our customers liked it, the community liked it. And I think it was for us to learn and to take that learning in.
So what did you learn? And what did you learn, and how have you applied that learning today towards the causes that you're supporting? And the second part of that is, what is the evidence that you're looking for that allows you to continue to support those causes?
Sure. I think part of it was we chose the organizations that we chose based on their location, how they supported mental health. So whether they were research, service, in the case of Kids Help Phone, or youth leadership in case of Jack.org. And we probably had a list of about 800 organizations across Canada that we started with. And we kept going down the list, and we did our due diligence to make sure that the ones that we picked everybody was who they said they were.
Yeah. When you're starting with a community of 800 plus organizations that are all worthy of support, how do you narrow that down? You mentioned kind of evidence-based. Like what is the outcome or the impact statement that you're looking for to decide if somebody's going to continue to be a partner that you're supporting?
Yeah, so I think as a family, we decided also was best at that point, because I was also very new to this, was to hire a consultant who was able to do the due diligence and knew the sector really well. And I did have somebody that I knew very well who did know the sector, and I trusted him. So we asked him to do the due diligence on these organizations and help us select these organizations.
What did that due diligence process entail?
That one, I think the short story is we would send out RFPs or letters of interest saying, would you like to partner with us? Here is who we are. This is our story. Can you tell us how we can partner with you? What do you need? And then some of the organizations, some of them would write back to us, some didn't. So we would keep going with the ones that wrote back to us, of course, the ones that showed interest. And it was also actually our consultant who actually went to meet with them and looked at, who are their board of directors? What's their cash requirements? Because we were also new, so we also didn't know how much cash we were going to have at the end of the year. So it was a little bit up in the air, and I wanted to make sure that we weren't making promises that we couldn't fulfill. So we need to be very honest with the charities that we were working with as well.
Have you seen that? And obviously you were new to it at the time, but since then, have you seen other family foundations get established where they actually send out letters of interest saying, "Hey, we're here. We'd like to work with you. Let's have a conversation"? Because that seems like a fairly unique thing.
Not that I know of. I don't think so. I could be wrong, but I haven't heard of that.
I think I hear a lot from the other side, which is, a lot of people in the charitable sector are frustrated because they're constantly sending out RFPs. Mm-hmm. And here you are asking people, "Hey, we're here. We've already sort of pre-vetted you. We'd like to have a more meaningful conversation." It just seems like a bit of an innovative approach.
Yeah, and I think we also sort of took a more business approach to the foundation. And I'd say almost not running it. It's a charity, but not running it as a charity. And we wanted to make sure what we were doing was efficient. We weren't asking charities for 50-page reports because we don't need that kind of information. So, send us back a page. So they don't have the staff to do it, they don't have the time, and they don't have the money. So we didn't want to start causing other problems and really taking away their time from all the good work that they're doing.
I think you become everybody's favorite charitable partner in doing that. So I guess part of the thing is how involved is the family today? And now that the strategy is set, how involved is the family in terms of the decision-making process? Or has that been relegated to the board and a process and a due diligence framework that is through other trusted providers?
Yeah, I think if I can just back up for a second, a couple years into the foundation, and of course we launched the foundation a few days before COVID, and so what I did is I used that time to make sure that I understood the mental health issues, and how we were going to go about doing this, and how do we refine our strategy, because it was so big, and our mandate was so massive, and so what I wanted to do was actually create a case for support, because we needed to narrow it down. And so I worked with somebody on the social impact piece who also I learned how to do this. And really I learned, I took everything as a learning experience. Every day I learned something, and it was a very steep learning curve, but I took it all in. And what we came up with was actually we did research. We had, on the mental health piece, we had people that we talked to on the research side. We had people, some of our employees. We had a whole bunch of people, probably about, it might have been 10, it was a much smaller project. We didn't have the cash as a big organization. But that's really how we did that. And that really sort of got the strategy really narrowed down to where we support all Canadians. And it's through using creativity, technology, and innovation to eliminate the stigma of mental health, using content creation and storytelling. So really the idea is getting people talking to eliminate the stigma.
The foundation is created. It's an extension of the work that Henry's is doing in all of the communities across Canada that serves. The business gets sold, and now the giving legacy continues. How do you maintain that legacy of giving and supporting mental health when you no longer have that presence in the local communities that you once had? Sure.
I think we were also lucky that we were gaining presence as the Henry's Foundation when we were tied with Henry's. And we did get the awareness out, and we were starting to run events. And so I think that in and of itself helped us get to a certain point. So the social media at least got to a certain point, so we had an audience. And so now that the Henry's Foundation was renamed to the Pixel Foundation, just based on the new owners, so I renamed the foundation. It's just a rename. It's exactly the same foundation, different name. And we sort of went out and saying, you know what? This is the Henry's Foundation, and we're now called the Pixel Foundation. And we made it sort of very clear about that we were called the Pixel Foundation now, but it's the same work.
As a private family foundation, what do you think the next steps are for you as you continue to try and make a dent in the mental health problems that we have in Canada?
I think for us and for the foundation actually keeps me very involved in the mental health field. So I'm part of a number of mental health groups, and it sort of keeps me on the cusp of what are the issues and what are the advancements that people are doing. And there is so much good work out there, but I think a lot of people don't know about it. And the fact that we're also more, I'd say we're still more public facing because it was sort of more on the customer side. And for me, it's sharing that information and making sure that people know about all of this work that's out there.
Can you talk a little bit about how this started out as a private family foundation, but is really not a private family foundation anymore? You mentioned before that obviously your family put a lot of money and support into this, but this is just an organization doing great work in the community. Can you talk about how that maybe transitioned away from being tied to the business to being something that was available to all Canadians?
Yeah, so I think, so when we originally thought about the foundation, we thought, well, what do we want to call this? What is it? And most people just have, it's a family foundation. It would be the Stein Foundation. Nobody knows who we are, and well, it doesn't, who cares? So, we sort of had the idea of saying, you know what, it's not a business decision, but we'd rather call it the Henry's Foundation. because it's a business that we're proud of. It's been around now for 4 generations, or 114 years at the time, until it was sold, which is pretty amazing in itself. And it was a well-known, trusted brand. And I think the fact that we had that trust was a big plus, because when we asked customers in the store when you can donate at point of sale, they said, okay, we know Henry's, we know you're going to do a good job with this. So yes, I will donate to you. And I think that actually in itself was, I think it was a good decision.
Given the journey that you've been on, where do you see Pixel Foundation going in the next iteration as a family foundation that has converted itself a little bit into a normal public-facing foundation that's doing important work in the community?
Yeah. I think for me, we continue still doing the work that we're doing. We had pulled back on donations because I obviously didn't know what was going to happen after we sold. And, you know, I had a couple of things in my personal life where it was hard to focus on just the foundation. So now that I've got the focus back, we're still doing what we were doing before, maybe not as quickly. I don't have the same resources that I had because I don't have the resources of the corporate side anymore. But all of the people that I'm meeting and the events that I go to and the information that we share, it's all still the same information that I would have had otherwise. But it's the idea of, I think, of making this, what information we can, making it public.
And just to tie this all up with a bow,
Yeah.
Can you reflect on how important were those early meetings with your family members when you decided to focus on mental health? Because it seems like your learning journey has gone through, you wouldn't have gone through the same path had you not focused on mental health.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we wanted to be authentic. We didn't want to just have a cause for the sake of having a cause. That's not enough. And it needs to be something that you're passionate about and that you've got a lot of determination because it's a lot of work. And you know what, it's not perfect, but especially being a charity as well, like there's so many regulations and things that you need to know about being a private foundation that you need to find good people. But for us, I think it was also making sure, as I said, like we were authentic. We were doing this for the right reasons, and it wasn't the business reason. For us, I think the mental health piece was because it runs in our family. And so my grandfather passed away in 1977. We're quite sure if it was today, he died by suicide, but we're quite sure if it was today, he would have been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. My dad also has it, and so does my sister, Jillian, who was the CEO of Henry's at the time. And she was actually very public about it. In December of 2021, she came out as the first CEO in Canada to admit that she lives with bipolar disorder. But the idea was that you can still have a life. And the fact that our grandfather did die by suicide is we wanted to do this so it didn't happen to somebody else. So our premise was if we're asking people to share their stories, we need to share ours. And so the fact that I have depression and I have shared my story, and I still have another story written that's to come, and how I felt and how that happened to me, and how, sure, you go through relapses. Everybody does. But how do you take care of that? And the fact is, if you're talking about it, you will get the help. If you're not talking about it, you won't get help. So I think up until we created the foundation, we talked about it within our families. We didn't talk about it outside. And just as I said, we're asking the public to share their stories, especially through, our first campaign was Uncaptured Moments. So asking people, using social media for good, and asking people to share their imperfect moments, because we only post our curated perfect lives on Instagram. So really asking people to say, show us your real lives. What does mental health mean to you? What does mental illness look like to you? We want to see it, and this is a safe place to show it.
Well, listen, 114-year legacy of business, but I think this is the legacy that you can all be proud of as a family, because I think you're making meaningful difference in the lives of so many Canadians. So, Amy, thank you very much for being here.
No, thank you for having me. It's been great. Thank you.